Okay, welcome to CIS 2400. This is the second session, and in this session, a few things. I'm going to continue from where I left in the previous session, but if you are only watching this video without watching the previous video, I think you should go and watch the previous video, the first one, because in the first video, I went through the assignment from last week. So I went and explained how you should have done the assignment. I went through the pivot table. I went through the subtotal. I talked about the discussion question that was asking you about the business process, and I gave you some pointers to how you should have answered that question. I'll also discuss about the assignments for this week and what I expect you to do for this week. So if you have not watched the previous video, I will highly recommend that you watch the previous video before you watch this. So on this video, what you're going to be doing is continue from where we left. I'll talk about some few concepts, and like I mentioned before, it's always advisable before you go to class, at least make sure that you have at least an idea of what's happening in the class. So read the chapter, or at least browse through the chapter. Spend some time, because professors don't give you everything. They give you 1/3, the other 2/3 is yours. So it's actually more productive if you go to class with questions. That makes for a more entertaining and more informative session, because when you have questions and those questions hopefully they are answered, then you're able at least to see whether you are learning, and you're able to see whether you are applying the knowledge. So for answering the assignment for this week, I've provided some pages from the textbook. I shouldn't be doing that, but I'm just trying to make you find out where you'll be able to find the information. So when you go to the assignment pages, you'll see some documents that I've posted there that point you to where in the book the questions are coming from. And the reason why I'm doing that is because last week from the discussion, some of you were answering, and I don't have an idea where you're getting your answers from. So make sure you read the question, understand the question, write something down coherent, and then go ahead and present. For this week, we're going to be using the discussion board. So the oldest version. We'll take a break from VoiceThread, but then we'll come back to VoiceThread again, because we are trying to help you improve your communication skills. Okay, welcome, Jakaya. Any questions? I guess no questions. Is that it? No questions? Okay, so let me see whether I can see where we left in the previous class. And I'm going to share that with you. So give me 1 minute. And feel free to jump in if you have any question. And this is going to be a Chrome tab. Is the reading mode? Okay, share that. Okay, so this is what we were doing in the previous class, and we went, I think, up to here, this far, where we have the intermediaries, and what I will walk you through is some of the things that I think you should be able to. So this week we're talking about the e-business, and like I said, if you're just joining in now, it might be a little bit confusing. If you have not read the book, this is all new to you. You're going to be very confused, maybe a little bit, but anyhow. So e-business is doing business on the internet, electronic business, and this is some of the marketing benefits that we encounter when we are doing business on the internet. In the previous video, we actually stopped on the concept of the heat map, which is used by most of the stores to track their customers. So on the internet, you'll be seeing things like the banner ad, you'll be seeing the click data, you're familiar with the cookies, okay? We have the freemium. So click-through is whereby you go to the website, and as you click, as you move through the website, you're doing the clicking, the website is actually tracking to see where you're going. So that's very similar to like the heat maps. So with the click data, somebody will go back and look at that data and analyze it. And from analyzing that data, they'll be able to know which are the hot spots where the customers are clicking and where are they spending even more time. And from there, you'll be able to know how you're going to enhance or improve your website. So we talked about analytics, which is making decisions that are based on facts. And we have said that there is a lot of data out there. And if you're very good at analyzing the data, you can actually improve your what? Your chances of getting a job. So this is why we have these resources. So CraigStream, the use of cookies also is used for tracking the customers, and on like that. So make use of that pop-up. Also, some things will pop up, and then if you click on them, the store gives you some coupons sometimes, but they're also able to get some information about you. So when you're reading your book, sometimes they have things that they underline, and these are like the key things that you need to be familiar with. So clickstream data is very, very important. This is very useful in marketing. If you're designing a website, you also want to make sure that it's easy for people to use, because if the website is easy for people to use or navigate, then you're going to have customers come back, what you call the repeat customers. Okay, I talked about the clickstream analytics or the way like that. So in terms of the website analytics, so there are some websites that actually keep sight of this data, and you can see what you're calling the hits per day, and then how many people are going to that website, and then you have the new. So if you're running a website, you want to make sure that you're generating traffic to your website, and there are different techniques that you can use to do that. Google does not sell anything. They make their money from advertising, so they want to make sure that anytime that they send you to a website to go look for some things, that you're spending more time on that website. And then if you click on some websites, if you buy something, then they're able to get their revenue from there. Okay, so in terms of the business, we talk about the four major e-business models, and when we start by defining what is a business model, which is nothing else but is a plan that tells how a company creates, delivers, and generates revenue. If you look at Walmart, they sell what? From their original concept was to sell products at low what? Prices, okay? And for them to do that, they had to open a store, okay? And then they make these huge stores, and sometimes you can go to Walmart and they want to make sure that you can buy everything from Walmart, okay? So you go in there, you can do your grocery, you can do your what? Your clothes, your shoes. If you have a farm, you can buy some farm equipment, all the way like that. So that's their business model. But now they have expanded the internet. So now we have what you're calling the e-business, electronic business model, and there are usually four of them. Okay, so we have what you're calling the business to business. So this is a table that you might want to have somewhere. Okay, because if you go for a job interview, they might ask you for, give me an example of an business model. But even for your own understanding, you need to be familiar with this if you've taken this class. So we have business consumer, we have business to business, whereby businesses sell to each other. So if you have been in the hospital and you go through some treatment and they have to bill you, those hospitals, they use a software, and that software is developed by another company. They have to buy that software. So when they are selling to each other, that's what's called business to business. So you find that whereby businesses are selling to each other. Some of the most common softwares that are bought by the companies are like the Oracle, which is actually made by Oracle, and then the SAP. Okay, so these are for helping the businesses run their business processes. Then we have what we are calling business to consumer. Okay, so this is a business that is selling to consumer. This is very common. It's the one that is very, very common. Now, in terms of how the business to consumer is done, it can be through what you're calling brick and mortar. So this is only a physical store. There is no internet involved. And then we have click and mortar. So most of the businesses actually have this model where they have a part of each. So if you go to Walmart, you can buy things from the store, or you can buy on the internet, pick from the store, and the other way around. Okay. And then we have some businesses that are only purely online. Google doesn't have physical stores. Okay, everything that Google does is on the internet. Okay, so that's what you call a pure play or virtual business. So brick and mortar, click and mortar, these are some concepts that you need to be familiar with. Okay, this is the language of the subject. So note about that. Then we have what you're calling consumer to what? To business. And some of the examples like Priceline, where you go in and you set the price that you want for an air ticket, and then the companies, you look and see, do we really want to sell a ticket for $400 from UK, from Durham to RDU to France? And based on the capacity that they have, they may sell it to you, okay, or not. So that's part of what you're calling consumer to what? To business. And then we have consumer to consumer. Craigslist is an example. eBay, whereby you're selling to each other. So this is the model that you need to be familiar with. Okay, it's four of them. Anytime you hear about the e-business model is going to be either business to business, business to consumer, consumer to business, or consumer to consumer. And if business consumer, then you can fill those four boxes over there. Are we together?
Yes.
Okay, so you might have heard about the gig economy. The gig economy, okay? So that's the Uber drivers, things like that. And it's coming from what? It has something to do with, this says comes from the music world. So a paid appearance of limited duration, okay? So when you're Uber driver, that's not your full-time job. Some people do it like kind of like full-time job, but it's not considered a full-time job. So these are things that you do for what? For a specific amount of time. And the internet has allowed that to do what? To proceed a lot. Okay, so there are very many people who are doing that. And Intuit, I think they do taxes, predicted that by 2025, 50% of American workers will be independent contractors and members of the gig economy. Okay, that's a lot. 2025 is actually not very far away. Now, I don't know with the COVID, this might actually be either come sooner or maybe a little bit later. So that is what was predicted then. Okay, so these are some of the forms of revenue that you can use to generate money on the internet. So we have what you call in the content providers. So they provide digital content such as news, music, photos, videos. So if you go to like CNN.com, CNN doesn't sell you anything, okay? So they provide content for you. And then from there, people will advertise and things like that. Intermediaries, so you have information, and then you have the go-between. Okay, when we talk about the intermediaries, so we are forming some words, and what you're going to find that is with the internet, most of the language in the internet is actually borrowed from the everyday language, because the internet is kind of like a new concept that came up maybe what, 2020, 1980, 40 years now. Okay, so they use a lot of the language that has already been developed. So we have information, and then we have what, intermediaries. We come up with what you're calling intermediaries. So if you want to buy a house, for instance, you go to zero.com. Zero doesn't own any houses, but what they do is they provide you with information about houses in a certain location, and then they even have more information about those houses in that information in that neighborhood. So they kind of combine what you're calling like a mashup. So you can see the houses, you can see the schools in that neighborhood, you can sometimes even see the crime rate, and on like that. Then you have online marketplaces, so Amazon, eBay, and on like that. So these are some of the forms of the e-business. Remember, we have a business model, and then we have the forms. Okay, so make sure that you have that distinction, and they go on and explain something like that. Search engine, we're familiar with what a search engine is. Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, all the way like that. And also we have what you're calling the search engine optimization. This is actually a concept. When you go to, like for instance, Google, and you're searching for something, if you do pizza, now Google is smart enough to know that if you're searching for pizza, they're not going to give you a pizza joint in California. They'll give you information about the pizza joint in this location. Okay, so that's because of a concept of what you call the DNS, domain name server. So there is a computer that has information about all those computers in this neighborhood, and they know where you're located. So there's a way to track you and all that. So with search engine optimization is actually a concept that uses science, and what they do is they try to make sure that when you search for something, some of the websites will come up. Now, some people actually pay Google to make sure that if you're searching for information, their websites will come up higher. Okay, so you might come across what's called the SEO. If you are computer science or in the business world, you should be familiar with that, because if you're going to be advertising on the internet, your market people might come and say, hey, we want some money, we need to be able to use what's called search engine optimization and things like that. So that allows us to be able to do things like pay per click. So you're generating revenue each time a user clicks a link to a retailer's website. So if you're using Google, then that's how they're going to be making their money. Also pay per call, if somebody is what? Makes a call, and then you have per conversation if somebody generates some call. So if you have, like for instance, chat, sometimes you have seen you go to a website and then a chat appears. So for some of the companies who are providing that chat service to that organization, if a customer is engaged with that bot, sometimes it might be a bot, a computer program that's just doing the AdWord, is doing the chat. If you engage with that customer, that company gets some money. Okay, but just the chat appearing without any conversation, they don't generate the money. So they come up with these different models of how they are going to be generating their money. And then you have what you're calling AdWords. So at least be familiar with some of this language. So the revenues can be coming from the fees from advertising, and that's how Google makes their own money. Sometimes it's licensing. When you license something, like what Microsoft does, is when you buy Microsoft Word or Excel Access, you actually don't buy the software. You're buying the license. Okay? So after a certain amount of time, they'll tell you your license is expiring, you need to renew it, or something like that. So that's what you're calling license. Then you have what you're calling the subscription, and you're familiar with how a subscription works just from everyday use. So that's what we have, and then we have what you're calling the e-business fraud. Okay, so with hitbots is whereby some people actually got the website and then they create some website that actually generate what you're calling the clicks, because some of the companies actually pay based on how many clicks. So if you create a website and you have a link for Walmart on your website, then what you can do is you can have a contract with Walmart. So based on how many people click on that link and go to Walmart, Walmart gives you some money. So what some people do is they create a computer program, and then that computer program will be generating what you're calling clicks. So that's what you're calling the fraud click, okay, and the hit bot. So based on a computer software, you're going to be generating a lot of clicks that is mimicking customers, but it's actually not customers. So some people have made some money from there, but that's what you're calling e-business fraud. So if you are a business manager, you need to be very careful that you're not paying people from your organization for what is called the click fraud or the hit bots. Are we together?
Yes.
Okay, so Cyborg, there's actually a movie called Cyborg, okay? And then we have the anthropologist, and you're saying is an individual who studies the interaction between humans and technology, okay? So Cyborg anthropologist. And these are some of the e-business tools that they use. So you can study how people are using email, instant messaging, podcasting, all the way like that. Remember, these are some of the resources that you use on the internet, okay, on the internet. So in the previous video, we made a distinction between the internet and www, which are two of the most common concepts, okay? So the internet allows you to be able to use these resources. You're not going to be able to use the email. You can actually use the email without the internet, because you can set up a network in an organization, internal network, and then you're able to use like what you're calling email, and you can also do video conferencing, okay? But when it goes to the web, then you need the internet. So remember, this is the internet with a capital N. Internet with a small n means just nothing but computers that are connected together to form a network, okay? So internet, capital N, is a global network that connects computers in the US to Europe, all the way like that. So we're familiar with email, and we have internet service providers. So these are companies that actually allow you to access the internet. So basically what they do is they're the ones that pay and they own what we are calling the telecommunication cables. So between Europe and the US, we have fiber optic cables that have actually been laid under the sea. So that's how the information travels from the US to Europe. Okay, the same thing with South America. So those companies, sometimes they're the ones that are actually paying for that. That's why we end up paying for the internet services. Okay, so we have American Online, AT&T, Comcast, Atlink, NetZero, all the way like that. So we're calling this the internet service provider. You don't need to go into more details about that, but at least know something about what they are and what kind of services they provide. Instant messaging, we're familiar with that. We always use that messaging. Okay. Podcasting. So we have a podcast, and then we have video conferencing. Okay. WebEx, things like that. Web conferencing and webinars. Telepresence robot. So this is actually a whole device display to enable video chat and video conferencing. So at least have an idea about how you can use these resources to communicate on the internet and also to use them for your business. Most of the companies are actually using these ones nowadays since the COVID came about. So you can see how technology is actually being applied now. We also talk about what you're calling the content management, all the way down like that. Okay. Okay, taxonomy. So let's see, what's the next piece here? Okay, so Web 2. Now the web, what's called the Web 1.0, like we mentioned in the previous video, is when the internet came about in the 1980s and people were able to use the resources on the internet. If you take an example of a website, most of the websites were not very interactive. They were one way. You were able to post the information there, and users will go to the website, they'll read the information, but they were not able to interact with the information on the internet. With Web 2.0, they have added some interactivity. So you can add some videos, you have more animations, you have charts, and things like that. And then we have what you're calling the Web 3.0, which is actually using artificial intelligence and more resources. So the main distinction is about the interactivity and the features that are there on the internet. So note about that. Okay, so we're talking about being the next generation of the internet. Remember the internet with a capital I. Okay, that's the global network. Okay, so we have more resources. We're able to do collaboration. We can share, and most of the things are free. So the internet is free, but it's also not free. Okay, because you kind of end up paying. Okay, but we maintain it as being free. Now there was a debate a few months ago about controlling internet. Okay, whether we should keep the internet free, and whether that's what we're talking about, whether we should be able to keep the internet the way it is, or we should have the internet service providers controlling the internet. At the moment, the internet is kind of free. That's why if you're able to watch stream like stream on Netflix or any other streaming media, okay, and Netflix is making a lot of money, although they're not ISPs. So what they were trying to do was to make it in such a way that if you have, for instance, AT&T and you're streaming Netflix, then they'll be able to control the traffic of Netflix so that sometimes they minimize how much you're able to get on your devices, because they were saying Netflix is making a lot of money through the streaming, and yet they don't control most of these resources. So it's a kind of like a slippery ground. But for now, the internet is free. We don't know how long that's going to take. It all depends on the power of the lobbyists. Okay, so we have JavaScript, scripting language developed by Netscape, used to create interactive websites. So this is actually a big driver of what you're calling Business 2.0 or Web 2.0. So with JavaScript, you can make the website more interactive, and you don't need a lot of technical knowledge to be able to learn how to do that. Okay, so a little bit of that, you can read that, and then these are some of the characteristics of Web 2.0, content sharing through open sourcing. You can go on the internet, create your own blogs. That's one of the assignments for this week. Okay, so user contributed content, collaboration, you can do a lot of that, collaboration outside, so inside and outside, a lot of YouTube videos, you can go out there. So that's what you mean by content sharing, and user contributed content is part of the Web 2.0. We didn't have YouTube in Web 1.0 or Business 1.0, e-business 1.0. Okay, so a little bit about search engines and what they do, Google, and then you can see they have different acronyms. So the last one shows the domain name and the type of domain this is. So .com is for commerce. Okay, when you say something like .company and then you have Hong Kong, and then maybe this is China, I guess. Okay, so the last three letters of the domain name will be telling you what kind of an organization that is. Okay, so if you see anything like edu, you know that's educational, not for business. Okay, so if you're computer science or CBS major, you at least need to know something about open systems and then what you're calling the source code. Okay, and source code is nothing else but is the instruction. So in the previous video, I showed some of the students. If you right click on the website, I don't know whether you can see that. I right click, it's not showing on your computer, I don't know why. And then you click on view the source. So anytime that you're on a website, right click and then go all the way down and click on view the source. It should be able to show you what you're calling the source code, which is nothing else but is the computer language. And view the source. Let me share that a little bit for you so at least you can have something to relate to. And then I'm going to come back. And this was the Clone tab, view the source. So this is what is called the source code. See that? So this is the source code. And basically, this is the language that the computers use to communicate. So anytime that somebody is telling you that they are writing computer program to design a website, that's what they're doing. Okay, so you can see that you already have JavaScript here. You see this is the language, the script that's being used to generate all that information. So this is what we see when we run our page. So I got that by right-clicking on the page that I was and then clicking on the source. So anytime that you have that, do that, and you'll be able to see what you call the source code. So most of the source code is written using what you're calling the HTML on the internet for the website, but for other programming languages, then it's that. Closed source is proprietary, okay? So this is software that is only licensed for legal use and is copyrighted, okay? So you've heard about the issues whereby some people say that some people in Asia, they are stealing the software from the US and copyright and things like that. So that's what is going on there. Open source is out there on the internet. Anybody can use it. Okay. The same thing with user contributed or user generated content. Okay. Virtual marketing. I think this one you can read. Collaborative software. We've talked about that. Explicit knowledge. So this part here is what we are going to be talking about for this week's assignment. Okay. So I think the question is asking you, how do companies manage knowledge? Okay. And this talks about that. So knowledge, the way you get knowledge, like I mentioned in the previous slide, is you have data, and I showed you when you're talking about that Excel worksheet, you have data, you analyze the data, you come up with information, and then from information, you have knowledge, okay? And then you want to be able to store that knowledge in the organization because you're going to use it to make decisions today and also into the future. So that's part of what you're calling knowledge management, okay? So knowledge is a real competitive advantage to organization. Remember we talked about the Porter's competitive model? Okay, so one of the ways that you can be competitive is if you have knowledge about your company, your customers, you have knowledge of the industry that you're in, you have knowledge of what's happening in the government, okay, you have knowledge of what's happening in the environment, and on like that, and you need to be able to share that information. So knowledge management involves capturing, okay, you classify, you evaluate, and then you retrieve and you share that. So it's kind of like an asset for the organization, okay? So read a little bit about this, and then you'll be able to see an example of a knowledge worker. They give you information there, and on like that. So explicit, something is explicit, is out there, okay? That can be documented, archived, and codified, often with the help of what? Management information system. So something like a patent, okay? So when you come up with something that is very innovative, never been done before, you come up with a patent. So somebody's not going to be able to duplicate that. A show that encourages students to watch, especially if you say that you want to start a business, is called Shark Tank. Most of the people who got Shark Tank, they have something that is unique. They try to solve a problem that has not been solved before, or a problem that has been solved before, but they're using different techniques to solve the problem. So most of the shark, are they called sharks? Yes. Most of the sharks, they'll always ask the contestants, do you have a patent? Because if you have a patent, that means that whatever you are working on, somebody cannot just duplicate that. Okay? So a patent, or what you're calling a trademark, or sometimes a business plan, these are what you're calling explicit knowledge, because you can document them, you can store them, and then you can what? Put them down, codified. Okay? Tacit knowledge is the knowledge contained in people's heads. You cannot put that down. Okay? And sometimes in an organization, you have somebody who knows how to do things very well. Okay, so they say, oh, you need to do that, you go to XYZ. So that person is very knowledgeable, but whatever they know cannot be put in words. Okay, the same thing sometimes happens like with quarterbacks. Tom Brady, very good. Okay, he didn't do very well last weekend, but he's a Hall of Famer, very knowledgeable about football. Okay, and some of the things that he knows, he might not be able to put that into word. So that's what we are calling tacit knowledge. So know about that. Okay, collaboration, we do that. And they are saying what? Collaboration is very important. We have what you're calling crowdsourcing. And you say that well, the cloud is smarter than the individual. And I don't know why they chose a brother to show that. But anyhow, so, Okay, so digital visionary, crowdfunding, we are familiar with that. what is that? GoFundMe. Yeah, always out there raising money from there. And then we have asynchronous. So what we're doing here is synchronous. Asynchronous is where you'll come back and watch the video when I'm not there. So live is usually asynchronous. Okay, so if you're going to be starting a business, this is a good session for you to go through. So we're talking about disruption because the one of the concept you're talking about in this class is about digital disruption. And when you think about coming up with a business, you need to answer some of these questions. Okay, so can you target a need that's currently not being met or met well? Okay, so your business is it going to be solving a problem that is already addressed, but you're going to be doing it in a different way, or are you solving something that has not been done completely? Okay, and sometimes when I watch Shark Tank, I'm out, but how people come up with these things that somebody never thought about. Okay, and then some of them end up like making a lot of money. Okay, and like I mentioned before, we have the what is that? The camera that most people use in their homes. And the guy who came up with it, he said the reason why he came up with it is because he was tired of moving from the basement to go and check who was at the front door. And he said there has to be a way in which I'll be able to know who is at the front door without me having to leave my games at downstairs and go all the way upstairs. So, like if you're in the house and there is somebody at the door, most of the parents will say, "Hey, Mary, hey, Tom, can you go and check who was there?" And the guy was tired of that. So sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. So think about this. How will you deploy your personal disruption strategy? Okay. So how are you going to be able to start that business? How are you going to make sure that people know about the business and all the way down like that? Okay, so that talks about that. You're familiar with social networking and the social network analysis. So you map groups of contact, okay, to see who is connected to who. We have something called this thing, the 6 degrees of separation, okay, that if you go to 6 people, by the time you get the 6th person, they'll know somebody. That person will probably know the first person you started with, or something like that. Okay, so tagging, Foxonomy, they give you some examples there. Bookmark, we're familiar with the bookmark. Okay, so uniform resource locator, URL. So you bookmark a page the same way if you're reading a book and you stop reading, you'll put a bookmark there. You put a mark there to show that's where I stopped. And then if you want to continue, you can come back next time and start from there. I said internet borrows a lot of language from the everyday use. Now we have a website bookmark. It's the same concept. You go to a website, you like it, you want to come back to it. What you do is you save that website or that uniform resource locator through the browser. And then when you come back next time, you can click on it and it's going to take you from where you stopped. So that's what you mean by a website bookmark. Okay, disruptive debate. What are we doing here? Blogs. Okay, so snackable, like a snack. See, talked about it again. So snackable content. So these are some of the tools that you can use for collaborating. And you're saying it's content that is designed to be easy for readers to consume and to share. Okay, and we give some of the examples here. A blog. One of the assignments for this week is actually about the blog. So they ask you to go to the website, internet, and find out 3 types of consumer blogs or customer blogs and talk a little bit about them, and then you're supposed to design like an example of a blog. So this week assignment is a little bit more involving, but I hope you have time to do that, and it's something that you can actually use even to market yourself. Okay, people make money from blogging, lots of money. So that's a way that you can generate revenue for yourself. So we have blogs, we have wikis, and then we have what you're calling mashup. Okay, and they give you some example. I talked about Zillow. Okay, you have Infopedia all the way like that. We have blogs, Southwest Disney. They have examples there, and then the wikis. Wikipedia is one of them, and you're familiar with it. So they explain a little bit about what the blogs are, microblogging. Okay, wikis, things like that. So read a little bit about that. And I did provide some of the information, and I'll provide the template for how you should be answering the question. So if you don't see it there, remind me. Okay, social media marketing. These are some of the tools that you can use to help you with that. LinkedIn, Facebook, Pinterest is now becoming very popular. We have YouTube, and actually we have moved to what? Instagram now, I think, and TikTok all the way down like that. Okay, So this concept, what you see is what you get, means that if you design your website very well, customers will come back. If it's not very well, they'll not come back. Okay, so you have to be very careful even when you're designing your blog, because that can determine who comes to your website, who doesn't come to your website. Okay, then we have Web 3.0. So we have a way for people to describe information so that computers can start to understand the relationship among the concept and topics. So basically what we are saying is that with Web 3.0 there is more interaction, and then we are using artificial intelligence to help us do that. So we have deep web, another concept that you might be familiar with. A lot of stuff is happening in the deep web. Most of us don't have access to that. Okay, and is inaccessible to conventional search engines. A lot of not so positive things actually happen down here. So you want to be very careful when you're going here, because you can get into a lot of trouble. For now, just have an understanding that there is something called deep web where some things not very good happening, and I wouldn't encourage you to be venturing in there. And probably that's the end of this. Yep. So, any questions? Are you there? Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.